Went to a family reunion hoping for peace. Ended up with fights, tears, and leaving more messed up than ever. It was a grey, quiet morning when the invitation arrived. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, staring out the window at the overgrown yard I kept promising myself I'd mow, when the doorbell rang. On the porch sat a glossy envelope, my name written in looping cursive I hadn't seen in years. It didn't need a return address. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. I opened it with a mix of dread and curiosity. Inside was a card, hand-lettered in gold ink. You are warmly invited to a family reunion at Rosewood Manor. Rosewood Manor. Just seeing the name made my stomach tighten. That house was a monument to our family's dysfunction, the setting for countless holiday arguments, drunken fights, and icy silences. It was the place where my siblings and I had grown up and the place we'd barely escaped from. I flipped the card over, reading the details. A long weekend, Friday to Sunday. No excuses. No maybe next time. Just we all need this. It's time to come back together. I called my sister, Rachel, to see if she'd gotten the same invitation. She answered on the second ring, sounding rushed. "Yeah, I got it," she said before I could even ask. "Are you going?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "What about you?" Rachel sighed heavily. "I don't really have a choice. Mom's been calling me non-stop. You know how she is, she won't let it go." That sounded like Mom. If she'd decided it was time for a reunion, she'd wear us down one by one until we showed up. "What about Nate?" I asked. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. "Good luck getting him to show his face. He hasn't spoken to any of us in years." Nate, our youngest brother, had always been the wild card. He'd vanished after Dad's funeral, leaving behind a trail of bad decisions and unanswered phone calls. The idea of him walking through the doors of Rosewood Manor felt as unlikely as the rest of us leaving without a fight. "Maybe it'll be different this time," I said, though even I didn't believe it. "Sure," Rachel said dryly, "and maybe pigs will fly." I arrived Friday afternoon, pulling up the gravel driveway that led to the house. Rosewood Manor hadn't changed in the 10 years since I'd last seen it, its white paint still chipped, its windows still glaring like disapproving eyes. The air felt heavy as I stepped out of the car. Memories flooded back, the sound of Dad shouting, the way Mom used to slam cabinets when she was upset, the endless arguments between Rachel and Nate that seemed to echo through every room. Inside, Mom greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked thinner than I remembered, her hair streaked with more grey. "You made it," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. "I'm glad." "Yeah," I said, glancing around the foyer. "Who else is here?" "Just Rachel so far." "Nate's ... Well, I'm hoping he'll show." Of course, Nate was late, or possibly not coming at all. By the time we sat down for dinner, the mood was already strained. Rachel and I had spent the afternoon exchanging awkward small talk with Mom, avoiding any mention of the past. But the cracks in our polite facade started to show as soon as the food was on the table. "So," Rachel said, her voice dripping with forced cheer, "how's the city treating you?" "Fine," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Work's busy. You know how it is." She nodded, but didn't say anything else. Rachel and I had always been opposites. She thrived on structure and rules, while I preferred to keep my options open. Our lives had diverged so much that it felt like we barely knew each other anymore. "Any word from Nate?" I asked, directing the question to Mom. Her smile faltered. "He said he'd try to make it," Rachel snorted. "Right, I'll believe that when I see it." Mom shot her a warning look. "Let's not start." "Start what?" Rachel said, raising an eyebrow. "It's not like I'm wrong. He hasn't exactly been reliable." "Maybe give him a chance," I said, though I wasn't sure why I was defending him. "It's been a long time." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Exactly. He's had plenty of chances." Halfway through dessert, The sound of a car pulling up the driveway made us all freeze. Rachel sighed. Great. Here comes the prodigal son. The front door creaked open, and Nate stepped inside, looking just as I'd imagined, disheveled, tired, and unapologetic. His hair was longer than it had been the last time I saw him, and his leather jacket reeked of cigarette smoke. Hey, he said, his voice casual, as if no time had passed at all. Mom's face lit up, and she rushed to hug him. You made it. Yeah, Nate said, patting her back awkwardly. Traffic was a nightmare. Rachel shot me a look, her lips pressed into a thin line. We all sat back down, and Nate piled his plate with food as if nothing was wrong. But the air around the table was electric, every word a potential spark. So, Rachel said, her tone sharp, what have you been up to these days? Not much, Nate said, shrugging. Work here and there, travel. Work, Rachel said, raising an eyebrow. Doing what exactly? Nate's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. A little of everything, construction, odd jobs. Rachel snorted. Right, sounds stable. Rachel, Mom warned, but the damage was done. I'm sorry, Rachel said, her voice icy. It's just hard to take someone seriously when they can't even return a phone call. Maybe because I didn't want to talk to you, Nate shot back, his tone sharpening. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. After dinner, I escaped to the porch, hoping the cool night air would clear my head. The sound of crickets filled the silence, but even out here, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to snap. Rachel joined me a few minutes later, her arms crossed. Can you believe him? She said, her voice low but furious. He just waltzes in like he's done nothing wrong. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to take sides yet. Inside, I could hear Nate and Mom talking in the living room. Or rather, Nate talking and Mom trying to keep the peace. This reunion was already teetering on the edge, and it wasn't even the first night. I didn't know what would happen next, but I had a sinking feeling it wouldn't be good. By Sunday morning, the house felt like it might explode. Every word exchanged was laced with tension, every glance a challenge. Breakfast was an ordeal. Rachel sighed dramatically every time Nate opened his mouth. Nate rolled his eyes at everything Rachel said, and Mom tried to smooth things over with forced cheerfulness that only made it worse. I stayed silent, watching the storm gather. I didn't want to pick a side, but it felt inevitable. Do you always have to be this difficult? Rachel finally snapped at Nate as he slouched in his chair, lazily poking at his eggs. Do you always have to be this uptight? Nate shot back without missing a beat. That's enough, Mom said, her voice trembling, but neither of them listened. You waltz in here to years of silence, act like you're the victim, and expect everyone to just welcome you back with open arms. Rachel continued, her voice rising. I didn't ask for this reunion, Nate said, his tone sharpening. If you hate having me here so much, why don't you just leave? Because I actually care about this family, Rachel shouted, standing up so abruptly that her chair scraped against the floor. Caring means doing more than pointing fingers and judging everyone, Nate said, standing too. Stop it, Mom's voice cracked as she slammed her hands on the table. Everyone froze. You think this is what I wanted? She said, her voice shaking. I wanted us to come back together, to be a family again. But you're also wrapped up in your own grudges that you can't even see what you're doing to each other. The room was silent except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Rachel sat back down, her face pale. Nate crossed his arms, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Mom stood there for a moment, trembling, then turned and walked out of the room. I followed her, finding her in the living room with her head in her hands. I thought this would help, she said softly, her voice muffled. I thought if we came back here, we could fix things. I didn't know what to say. I didn't think there was anything that could fix us. By the afternoon, the tension boiled over again. It started with Rachel accusing Nate of always being selfish. Nate retaliated by calling her a control freak. Mom begged them to stop, but this time, I couldn't stay out of it. "Enough," I shouted. "You're both impossible." Rachel turned on me, her face flushed. "Oh, great. Now you're taking his side." "I'm not taking anyone's side," I snapped, "but you're not helping. You've been picking at him since he got here. And you've been enabling him," Rachel shot back. "Stop making this about me," Nate shouted. The argument escalated into a shouting match, with old grievances flung like weapons. Rachel brought up the time Nate borrowed money and never paid it back. Nate reminded Rachel how she ditched him when he was struggling after Dad's death. And then Rachel turned on me, accusing me of running away when things got hard. By the time we realized Mom had left the room, it was too late. We found her on the porch, sitting in the old rocking chair, her face streaked with tears. "I can't do this anymore," she said softly. "You're tearing each other apart." "Mom, we're sorry," Rachel started, but Mom held up a hand. "No, I thought bringing you all back here would help. But maybe this family is too broken to fix." Her words hit harder than any argument. We packed up in silence, none of us looking each other in the eye. Rachel left first, slamming the door behind her. Nate lingered in the driveway, as if he wanted to say something, but he just shook his head and drove off. I stayed to help Mom clean up, but the house felt hollow. The reunion was supposed to bring us back together, but all it had done was confirm how far apart we drifted. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. Maybe time will heal the wounds. Or maybe this was the final nail in the coffin. All I know is that when I left Rosewood Manor for the last time, I didn't feel relief. I felt grief for the family we could have been, and for the family we'd never be. If you liked the video, please leave a like, comment and subscribe for more content like this.